Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men and technically continue our coverage over the Age of Apocalypse storyline. Now, here's the thing, because technically at this moment, we're still covering the preludes that lead into the X-Men Age of Apocalypse storyline properly. And let me explain, because when it came to Marvel Comics, in the early days of them working on this event, they gave us X-Men Alpha number 1. Now, X-Men Alpha number 1 was supposed to be the starting off point for their brand new event that led into other books we used to kind of explore the brand new world that Marvel had created with this event. But the problem was that at the tail end of their event, they began to give us all these different prelude books that led into X-Men Alpha number 1. That kind of shows the world is like when it came to Apocalypse in the early days of trying to take over North America. Now, just in case we do have anybody who's just joining us when it comes to our coverage over Age of Apocalypse, let me explain where this event came from. So we got to jump back over to Legion Quest. Now, when it comes to Legion Quest, it's the whole idea of you had Legion go back in time to kill off Magneto. And the reason why, because he believed that if Magneto was not around, then Charles Xavier should have been able to achieve his goal, where mutants and humans are able to live together in harmony. The problem was that when you had Legion go back in time to kill off Magneto, he killed off Charles Xavier, which then created a brand new timeline where you now have Apocalypse trying his best to take over North America by this point in the timeline. But with the death of Charles Xavier, it truly did affect a lot of different characters in different types of ways. Like, for example, Cyclops and also Havok. Now, in the original main Marvel Universe, Cyclops was the first X-Men that Charles Xavier had recruited. But the thing is, in this reality, it didn't go that way. Instead, you had Cyclops and also Havok be adopted by Mr. Sinister. But on top of that, Mr. Sinister is the right-hand man for Apocalypse. So for our two heroes, or usually heroes, they're now on the side of evil. They now work for Apocalypse, but also Mr. Sinister. So this storyline is really more focusing on them being on the side of evil, but also being confronted by their real father. And so getting into the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up 5 years in the past. Now, technically, this was the moment where you had Apocalypse begin his conquest to take over North America. The whole idea of survival of the fittest. The strong may live, the weak may die, the strong may lead, the weak must follow. With all that being said, when it comes to Apocalypse, he said, you know what? The first place I am going to attack is Manhattan and make it my capital of my brand new territory. So that took place 5 years ago in the past. But also 5 years ago in the past, you had this random spacecraft appear in the middle of Manhattan. Now, as soon as it did arrive in the middle of Manhattan, you then had the forces of Apocalypse go out of their way to shoot that thing out of the sky. Now, after doing that, you then had the salvage team move in to figure out what's actually inside the spaceship. And once they do open it up, they say, hey, you know what? We should go ahead and call this one in because this is very interesting. Now, before we were able to learn what was inside that spaceship, we jump over to Havok and also Cyclops going through a training session. Now, the whole point of this session is to not use their powers to take down their enemies. The problem is that Havok is struggling, and you have Scott go out of his way to tell his brother what to do to help them win this battle. But unfortunately, Havok does not want to listen to Scott at all. And the reason why, because in this reality, Alex hates Scott with a flaming passion because a lot of people show more love towards Scott than they do towards Alex. But either way, when it comes to Alex, with him losing his battle, he has no choice but to go ahead and use his powers. Now, like I said earlier, when it came to this brand new reality, Scott and Alex, they were adopted by Mr. Sinister. So he was the one watching over their training session. Now, you do have Sinister be confronted by Hank McCoy. Now, Hank McCoy works for Sinister, but also in this reality, he becomes Dark Beast. Technically, we're going to see Dark Beast here in a moment, but 5 years ago, he looked pretty normal. But it is him saying like, hey, Sinister, we found something very important inside that spaceship that you might want to see. And so now we jump forward 5 years. 5 years later, the present day, and we pick up with, well, Christopher Summers, the father to Scott and Alex Summers. But unfortunately right now, he's a prisoner of Sinister, but also being used right now for an experiment by Dark Beast, Hank McCoy. Now, here's the thing, because Hank McCoy is truly messed up. The man will do anything for the name of science. And right now it's him saying, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and run a few more tests on you. But you didn't have Christopher being able to break out of his binds to get away. Now, here's the thing, because it does kind of seem like Christopher does have super strength. But the question is right now, how? How in the world did he receive this super strength? Because in the old timeline, he was just a regular human. But either way, he was able to break out of the base that belonged to Sinister. But right after he was able to escape, he realized that he's in Manhattan. Now, for Corsair or Christopher Summers, he kind of realized like, yes, this is Manhattan, but he does not recognize it at all because one, it has been completely wrecked by the forces of Apocalypse, but also because the man has been gone for a very long time. But either way, you didn't have Christopher be confronted by Robbie Robertson, who's very important over in Spider-Man comics, works at the Daily Bugle. But apparently the man is trying his best to keep the humans informed about what's happening around the world, things that Apocalypse does not tell the humans at all when it comes to the world. But also you have Christopher wonder like, hey, where are my boys, Scott and Alex Summers? Now, here's the thing. They are well known in the world in Apocalypse territory. And so for Robbie, he said, wait, you're Christopher Summers, the supposed father to Alex and Scott Summers? Oh man, you know what? Let me tell you where your boys are at right now. And the thing is, you might not like going to hear about your boys. But now we have to jump over to Sinister. Now, when we do, it's really more a Sinister telling us that he now knows that Corsair had escaped. Now, here's the thing, because for Scott and Alex, they had no idea that their biological father was being kept in the lab of Dark Beast. In matter of fact, it's not even Sinister right now telling the boys about their father. Instead, it's him saying like, hey, a prisoner had escaped, and now we have to go out of our way to get that prisoner back here before bad things happen to that prisoner. And so it's Sinister saying, I don't want Scott and Alex involved in this mission at all. I want the rest of you guys, my people, to go out of their way to find this missing prisoner. So Northstar and Aurora, the Bedlam brothers, Implate and the Monet girls, you guys will go out of your way to find our missing prisoner. Alex and Scott, you have to stay behind for the time being. Now for Scott, he can't believe that he's not being involved in this mission because usually he would be. And also he's team leader. So what in the world is going on here? But now we have to jump over to Angel. Now, when it comes to Angel, in this reality, the dude has his own nightclub. Now, his nightclub, Heaven, is a neutral zone. So humans and mutants are allowed to go there without worrying about being attacked by the other side. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Angel, he's also somebody who works for both sides. He's able to get you intel on the other side or about the other side for the right price. But for right now, it's just Angel saying, hey, Alex, Havok, and also the Bedlam brothers, welcome to Heaven. Matter of fact, the drink's on the house. Go ahead and relax. Now for Havok, he's still very bothered about the idea of his brother being the team leader, but also kind of like Sinister showing more love towards Scott than Alex. But picking up with Sinister's hunting team, they're still trying their best to find Christopher Summers, but they do find Robbie Robertson. Now, he is quote unquote dead, but not really. And the reason why I'm saying that because they do find him and say, hey, he's dead, but his body is moving. And you do have these evil mutants go out of their way to kill Robbie, but there is a good reason why his body moved, even though he was quote unquote dead. But for these mutants, they're like, hey, you know what? Our target, Christopher Summers, is still nearby. Let's go ahead and try our best to find him and bring him in. And honestly, it didn't take them that long to find him. And matter of fact, it's kind of cool because you do have all these different mutants try their best to attack Christopher Summers. But the problem is, he knows how to handle himself. He knows how to defend himself. And so he was able to take them all down very easily. But after doing that, we kind of learned that he was afraid of the idea of losing control. Now, there is a good reason why he felt that type of way. But again, it will not be explained to us until the very end of this storyline. Now, it does not take that long for Scott to find out what happened to the hunting team. And so his main goal now is to get involved and to figure out who in the world is this prisoner, but to also bring him back in. But he also has Scott go out of his way to get his brother Alex involved. So now the two of them will go out of their way to hunt down their own father, even though they have no idea they really are hunting down their biological father. And really, it does not take Scott and Alex that long to find their missing team members. Now, they do find Implay. He is officially dead. He was killed off by Christopher Summers. But the rest of the team, they're still alive, but they're knocked out or just completely frozen in fear because what happened to their fellow team members. But for Scott and Alex, they have to continue on to find, well, their father. And you do have Scott and Alex head over to a cemetery and they do find their missing person, their missing prisoner. But they kind of find out that missing prisoner is their father, their biological father, Christopher Summers. Now for Christopher, he does recognize the boys automatically. He's all like, guys, it's me, it's your father. But for Scott and Alex, they're kind of like, dude, you've been gone for many years. Where in the world have you been? And so this kind of leads into the origin of Christopher in this reality. And really, it's more the idea of us seeing a flashback where it's a Summer family on their airplane just minding their business flying around. But then out of nowhere, their plane was attacked by a Shi'ar Empire spaceship. Now for Christopher, he made sure his boys got away by giving them a parachute and pushing them out of the plane to hopefully survive. But him and Catherine, his wife, they were captured. Now they were tortured over time. Catherine died, but Christopher lived on. Now, once you had Christopher being able to get put into a cell in the Shi'ar Empire prison, he met the other members of the Starjammers, and they were able to break out and be free. But the question is right now, what happened after that led to him coming back to Earth? But you didn't have our heroes back in the present day be attacked by a group of scavengers. Now, these scavengers are just people who are technically hungry. They're going to kill off other people as a way to get food. But either way, you do have our heroes go out of their way to defeat these scavengers. But after doing that, you have Scott realize that a bad storm is coming in very soon. They need to find shelter. And luckily for them, there's a building nearby. But here's the thing. For Scott and Alex, they want to continue to have a conversation with Christopher to kind of figure out it really is their father who came back into their lives. Now for Alex, he already believes that Christopher is their father. But for Scott, he's still on guard because he's afraid of getting hurt. But also it could be a trick once again. But now we have to jump over to, well, Sinister and Dark Beast. Now for these two characters, they're talking about Jean Grey, but honestly, she's not important for this storyline, but it's really more Dark Beast saying like, hey, what's going to happen when Scott and Alex find out that you had their father the entire time for the last 5 years in my lab? Like, they're going to be very upset with you. And the thing is, that is a possibility. And really, when we do jump back over to Scott, Alex, and also Christopher, it's them still trying to figure out like, hey, is this really their father? Like, Alex does agree it is their father, but for Scott, he's on guard. But it's Christopher saying, like, that's my son though. He's just like me, always on guard, always trying his best to protect himself, but to also protect other people, where Alex is kind of like his mother. Now, you do have Scott walk around the building to make sure that the entire building is secured. Except for Scott Summers, when he's walking around the building, he comes to find out that there are a bunch of dead people in this building. But the question is right now, like, what killed them off? Now, for Scott Summers, he does find Misty Knight, and Misty Knight is tied up. Now, she's not really going out of her way to explain what exactly went down here, but you do have Scott realize that Misty Knight should not be alone because, hey, look around, there's a bunch of dead bodies. Now, right after you have our two characters walk away, one of those dead bodies comes to life, and that would be Colleen Wing. But either way, it's now telling us that there's something going on in this particular building, and this kind of ties into Christopher Summers. And you'll see what I mean as we go through the rest of the storyline. Because once you have Scott and Misty Knight being able to regroup with Christopher and also Alex, you didn't have our heroes be surrounded by all the different dead people in that building. Now, yes, they were dead, but not technically all the way. And let me explain why. Because they have been taken over by the Brood. Now, the Brood is an alien race, and their main goal is to conquer, well, the universe, conquer different planets in the universe. But how they do it is completely nasty. Let me explain. So what they do is that they plant an egg inside of you. Once that egg hatch, you are slowly being turned into a Brood to add to their numbers. So all these dead people, they had eggs inside of them. And of course, they all begun to turn into, well, Broods. Now, you do have our heroes trying their best to fight against the army of Broods. Unfortunately, Misty Knight, she dies. But for Scott, Alex, and Christopher, they do run outside, but unfortunately, they are surrounded by more members of the Brood. But luckily, at the very last second, they are saved by Mr. Sinister. Now, for Sinister, his goal is to not attack the Brood inside the building. No, his goal is to attack Christopher. And the reason why, because Christopher Summers has also been affected by the Brood. That what happened right after he was able to free himself from the Shi'ar Empire. He got captured by the Brood and infected by them. And so for Sinister, for the last 5 years, he had been trying his best to supposedly save the life of Christopher. Now, in reality, it was just him trying his best to learn more about the Brood, this alien race. But either way, you do have Christopher turn into a Brood. And so for Scott, he has no choice but to go ahead and kill off his father. Now, with the death of his father, it brings more hatred between Alex and Scott. Because to Alex, he only believes that Christopher was the only thing he had left in his life that he truly cared for, that he does not care for Scott at all. But for Scott, it's kind of like, dude, our dad turned to a Brood, and it seemed like there was no other way to save his life. But for Alex, he does not care. He lost the last thing he truly cared for in this world. And the book kind of ends on that note right there. And so with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.